There is a silent anxiety in waiting, a feeling that life is happening somewhere else and we are being left behind. We mistake movement for progress and speed for purpose. This restless energy, this desire to force the future into arriving faster, is the heaviest burden we carry. But what if the greatest strength, the most profound healing, isn't found in the rush, but in the quiet grace of the pause? This is a story about the difficult, beautiful journey of learning to wait. It begins in a small, sun-drenched garden with a man named Elias. Elias moved through the morning mist like a man at war with time. His garden, a perfect rectangle of dark, turned earth, was less a sanctuary and more a grid. Every seed was labeled, every row measured to the centimeter, every tool hanging in polished chronological order. This small patch of land was his new office, and the soil was his new spreadsheet. The stakes, somehow, felt even higher. The silence of his new life was deafening. It was a hollow space left by the sudden, spectacular collapse of his career. The word failure was a cold stone in his stomach, a judgment he tasted with his morning coffee. He had been a man who managed timelines, who optimized results, who believed that any problem could be solved with enough pressure and sharp analysis. That world had shattered, leaving him with nothing but this soil and the frantic, buzzing energy of a man who needed to fix what was broken. He was here not for healing, but for a different kind of victory. He was here to prove. His gardening was not gentle. He pulled weeds with a sharp, aggressive tug, as if punishing them for their resilience. He checked his irrigation timers twice, then a third time, his brow furrowed. He resented the slow, indifferent rhythm of the sun and the patient, unfolding mystery of a seed. He wanted results. He wanted the vibrant colors of success, and he wanted them now. This frantic need for motivation came from a place of deep pain. He believed in the bruised and hurried parts of his heart that with enough discipline, enough control, he could force beauty to grow from this barren ground. He saw the garden not as a partner in his journey, but as a project to be wrestled into submission. His mind, still clinging to the pace of a world that had ejected him, had forgotten how to be at peace. His heart, in its rush to heal, had no patience for the soil. If Elias was going to conquer this new world, he needed a challenge that matched his ambition. He found it in a faded gardening catalog on a page tucked in the back. It was called the Azure Sun Petal. The description was a catalog of warnings. Notoriously fickle, a native of high-altitude deserts, requiring a precise balance of cool nights and bright, indirect sun. Its greatest demand, however, was patience. It was known to take an entire season to produce a single, fragile bloom of impossible electric blue. This, he decided, was his purpose. This flower would be his redemption. He approached it with the fierce, analytical discipline of his former life. He built a small, rudimentary greenhouse from old windows and pine. He ordered a special, sandy soil blend. He charted the pH levels, the water retention, the precise angle of the morning light. His motivation was no longer just to heal, it was to win. He would not just grow the sun petal, he would force it to grow faster, better, and more brilliantly than any patient gardener ever could. And for a short time, his methods seemed to work. Within 2 weeks, 3 impossibly tiny, pale green shoots pricked through the dark soil. They were no bigger than an eyelash, but to Elias, they were a validation. He felt a surge of pride, a familiar, intoxicating rush of control. He looked at the fragile seedlings under the glass, protected by his systems, and a dangerous thought took root. See? It just required more effort. This small success was a powerful illusion. He believed his meticulous effort was not just helping the process, but overriding it. He mistook nature's first slow step for a sign that it was bending to his timeline. This small sprout of life fueled his delusion, making him feel a sense of strength and command that he hadn't felt since his fall. The weather turned first. A sudden, suffocating heat wave clamped down on the town, turning the morning mist into a hot fog. The air felt heavy, and the sun, even through the diffused haze, felt like a judgment. For the azure sun petal, this was a critical threat. But for Elias, it was a test of his system. He misted the glass of his small greenhouse, but the temperature inside continued to rise. The tiny seedlings, which had been so green, began to look stressed, their leaves curling at the edges. This is where a patient gardener would have trusted the shade, would have waited for the cool of the evening, and would have let nature find its balance. But Elias was not a patient gardener. He was a man driven by a failure he was desperate to outrun. He saw the stress not as a signal to pause, but as a problem to be solved with more action. Convinced the heat was draining the nutrients, he mixed a batch of high-potassium fertilizer, twice the recommended strength. "They just need a push," he muttered to himself, watering the delicate roots with the potent chemical solution. "They need more strength." He was giving them rocket fuel when they needed cool water. The next morning, the mist had cleared and the sun was sharp. Elias walked to the greenhouse with a knot in his stomach he couldn't explain. He looked through the glass. Nothing. He opened the door, and a puff of hot, acrid air hit him. The 3 seedlings were not just wilted, they were scorched. They were paper-thin, brown and lifeless, burned from the roots up by the combination of his chemical help and the trapped heat. The pot of expensive, sandy soil was just a miniature grave. Elias stared at the empty pot. His meticulous charts, his graphs, his early victory, all of it had turned to ash. The silence of the garden was no longer peaceful. It was mocking. This tiny, insignificant death felt monumental. It was the echo of his first, greater collapse. The healing he had demanded from the soil had not only been refused, it had been reversed. He had poured all his fragile hope into this one difficult bloom, and it had shattered, leaving him completely and utterly broken. A healthy grief would have been a form of letting go. It would have been a quiet acknowledgement of the loss, a pause, a moment of healing. But Elias was incapable of pausing. The empty pot was a verdict, and he refused to accept it. That very afternoon, he drove to the nursery and bought 3 more packets of sun petal seeds. He didn't just rebuild the greenhouse, he engineered a fortress. He installed a small humming fan for circulation, a thermometer that synced to his phone, and a complex system of layered shade cloths he could adjust by the hour. His new discipline was not the calm consistency of a gardener, it was the frantic, sleepless obsession of a man consumed by guilt. He was no longer on a journey of growth. He was in a war with time. He would wake at 3 a.m., his heart pounding, a cold sweat on his skin, convinced he had missed a crucial step. He would rush out into the moonlight, flashlight in hand, to check the soil moisture, to adjust the fan, to search for any sign of impending failure. His own health began to fray. He forgot to eat. His face grew thin and pale. The garden, which he had hoped would be a place of quiet purpose, had become a battlefield. The new seedlings, which sprouted under this suffocating, perfect control, were not symbols of hope. They were hostages. He was not just trying to grow a flower, he was trying to rewind the clock. He was trying to undo the mistake with the fertilizer, the mistake at his job, the mistake of his entire, rushed and broken life. This obsessive control was a mask for his terror. He lacked the one thing the garden truly demanded, the courage to accept that some things cannot be forced, that true growth is an act of surrender, not of war. Elias returned to his garden, but he saw it with Alara's eyes. He saw the struggling, over-monitored seedlings. He saw the sterile, perfect rows. He saw the walls of glass and the anxious hum of the fan. He saw an engine of control, not a place of growth. You do not command the bloom, you only serve the soil. For the first time in months, he felt no anxiety, no frantic urge to do something. He felt only a quiet, profound stillness. His journey had been a war, and in this moment he was laying down his arms. With a slowness that felt foreign, he unplugged the fan. The silence that rushed in was a relief. He began to dismantle the greenhouse piece by piece, stacking the old windows against his shed. He was not angry, he was not defeated, he was just finished. He took the pot of struggling sun petals, and with a gentle, ceremonial finality, he emptied it, soil and all, into a forgotten corner of his yard he had designated for compost. It was not a burial, it was a release. It was an act of letting go. His transformation began not with a grand gesture, but with the smallest, most humble tasks. He did not plant new, ambitious flowers. Instead, he bought a pitchfork and a bag of earthworms. His new purpose was the soil itself. His discipline changed. He no longer woke with a jolt of panic. He woke with the sun and spent the mornings in a new kind of meditation. He turned the compost, mixing his failure, the scorched leaves and pale, dead seedlings, with kitchen scraps and fallen leaves, helping them break down into something rich and new. He weeded not with anger, but with a focused attention, feeling the difference between a root and a stone. He learned the rhythm of the water, the feel of the earth, the smell of healing. This slow, quiet work became his peace. He was no longer striving for an outcome, no longer demanding a trophy. He was simply serving. He was rebuilding the foundation. And in the process, the man who was all sharp edges and frantic energy was, soil layer by soil layer, being reborn. The seasons turned. The brittle cold of winter settled over the garden, and Elias let it rest. He spent the cold months reading, not about exotic specimens, but about the simple ancient partnerships of the land, how beans feed the soil, how marigolds protect the roots. His focus had shifted from dominion to harmony. When the new spring arrived, it was a different Elias who met it. The air was soft, and the earth was dark and fragrant from a winter of rest and a fall of rich compost. There was no anxiety in his movements. His journey had led him to a place of gentle consistency. He built no greenhouse. He bought no special soil. With a quiet strength he didn't know he possessed, he planted simple things. He planted rows of carrots, their feathery tops a delicate green. He planted lettuce and tomatoes, knowing they would feed him. And for healing, for simple beauty, he scattered a handful of native wildflower seeds, poppies and cornflowers, things that belonged to this soil and asked for nothing but sun and water. His new purpose was not to achieve, it was simply to tend. His garden began to thrive. It was not the perfect, curated grid of his past, but a place of resilient, cooperative life. He found a deep, satisfying peace in the small, daily acts of care. One humid morning after a night of soft rain, he was weeding near the compost heap, the place where he had discarded his failure, the scorched soil of the azure sun petal. A flash of color caught his eye, so bright it seemed impossible. There, pushing up from the edge of the compost, was a single, perfect flower. It was an impossible, electric blue. Elias crouched. A seed from his original failed batch must have survived the heat, survived the winter, and found in the rich, discarded mulch of his failure exactly what it needed. It had not been forced, not been monitored, not been protected. It had simply waited. It had grown in its own time, in its own way. He looked at the bloom, a vibrant miracle in the pile of refuse. He felt no surge of victory, no vindication, no desire to claim it as a trophy. He felt only a profound, quiet awe. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. In that moment, he understood the transformation. The entire journey had never been about growing the flower. It had been about becoming the kind of man who no longer needed to. The flower was not his reward. It was simply a reminder that the most beautiful things in life cannot be commanded, only received. Elias's garden continued to flourish, a vibrant tapestry woven from earth, water, and his newfound peace. He learned to read the sky for rain, to listen to the whispers of the wind, and to trust the invisible currents that guide all life. He understood that the greatest strength lies not in exerting control, but in cultivating connection. His journey had led him from frantic striving to quiet stewardship, from demanding results to simply honoring the process. And so, we arrive at the heart of Elias's story, a reflection for all of us caught in the relentless rush of modern life. There is a profound motivation to be found not in speed, but in stillness. We are often told to chase our dreams, to seize the day, to accelerate. But what if true fulfillment, true purpose, lies in the pause? 1. Patience is not passive waiting. It is active observation. It's tending the soil, not demanding the bloom. 2. True strength is found in surrender, not control. We cannot command the seasons of our lives, but we can learn to dance with them. 3. Healing is a slow route, not a quick fix. Like a seed, it needs darkness, time, and gentle nourishment before it can break through. 4th, failure is not an ending, it is compost. Every perceived setback, every lost hope can enrich the very ground for future growth if we allow it. 5. Letting go is the ultimate act of courage. It means releasing the outcome and trusting the unfolding. 6. Discipline, in its highest form, is consistency in care, not intensity in effort. It's showing up day after day without needing immediate reward. 7. Transformation happens in the unwatched pot. Often, when we stop forcing, when we release our anxious grip, life finds its most beautiful and surprising ways to bloom. 8. Inner peace isn't something you find, it's something you cultivate. It grows in the quiet moments between the pushing and the pulling, in the grace of the pause. Elias taught us that life is not a race to be won, but a garden to be tended. It asks for our presence, our respect, and our unwavering patience. In a world that constantly urges us to accelerate, perhaps the most revolutionary act is to simply slow down, to breathe, to trust, and to allow life, in its own perfect timing, to surprise us with its quiet, unexpected grace. May you find your own pace, embrace your own season, and discover the profound beauty that emerges when you serve your own soil.